take a minute.
Yeah.
I need to get a couple trees.
Actually less. Oh, did you?
What, really?
Yeah, that's when we're stepped out.
Probably see that anymore.
Yeah.
Argument?
Yeah.
They're always like,
They're pretty
well, if
fierce.
we could
I
do
don't know.
2.0,
Yeah.
we could fit another lot.
Oh, 100%. We can find resources.
People?
Why
Are you gonna do what? Why do they want to?
Someone else
Future
ended up
1.7.
texting.
Why aren't they?
Subdividing that one.
Yeah. making
They should go ahead and
lots.
put that out. I'm surprised Adam didn't comment on that one.
Yeah. What? Where they have that
Lot 7.
lot 7, where they do.
Is that your favorite one?
Yep. I'm sure you'll bring it up.
Come back,
Come back, show us what you want to do with lot 7. So I don't know. I get Mike's.
You read my mind. I think you should say it.
Yep.
I still think it's funny. The Edge still remembers when I made them give us a detail of the garage. With
I remember it.
Remember that?
It was hilarious.
And they were like,
Makes sense.
They're like, well, it'll fit. No, I want to see it on a drawing. That was when we met
I think they had to extend
Jared.
the garage.
And they had to extend it. They were like,
It
we
wouldn't
were
fit.
right. It didn't work.
It wouldn't fit.
And so that's why he jokes, because they all came to that meeting. Yeah. Because it was one of the first Edge multi-families they did here.
Yeah, it was humorous.
Okay,
Oh, she's awesome.
Yeah, between the steps
yeah.
within the
They were
garage.
partnering her
And
husband.
Because of how
Right,
it
but I
looks
got
fine.
It looks fine until you put in. And I don't say that
She's a character.
because I had to move my landing in my garage to fit my Suburban.
I back my truck in so that my bumper is over the back step.
Yeah.
It fits in the garage. And so I have a little step on the side to get into the house.
Super.
Yeah.
So did they,
They make garages the same size.
okay, we should ask her.
Eureka, huh?
Tell her that you want to stay in it because it looks really fun.
She doesn't want to move.
That does sound like fun.
Yeah, if you need to go. Of course, I don't know what you're gonna do, but if you need to go.
Oh, yeah, I honestly sat here, we can switch the nameplates or whatever. I just sat here because there's where the keyboard and everything works. Well, you can drive. You're welcome. But yeah, I will drive. If you want. I'm
Anyway,
saying.
we'll start on the domestic. If you need to get up and go, just go.
I'll keep my phone close, and if I need to, I'll let you know.
That sucks.
I eat one of those right before we're starting. Right before we're starting.
Ooh, yeah.
Wow. All right, guys, we're going to get started. I'd like to welcome everybody out to Thursday, September 19th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance from Craig, which I will tell you now, we will miss him. He is going to be leaving our city. And so we really enjoyed him while he was here, so.
Everybody please stand. Pledge allegiance.
Thank you, Craig. We do have a full quorum today. Turning to the Planning Commission, do we have any conflicts of interest on any items on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 1.4, which is an approval of minutes for August 1st, 2019, and look for a motion.
I move to approve item 1.4.
Second.
Motion by Adam, second by Andy. All in favor?
Aye.
Now we'll move on to administrative items with 2.1, which is a subdivision amendment to add 6 lots to Bland subdivision. And this is on for a public hearing. And I am going to read the public hearing policy and procedures so we're aware of it. The purpose of public hearings is to allow citizens to address items on the agenda. Citizens requesting to address the commission will be asked to complete a written comment form and present it to Wendy, the deputy city recorder. In general, the chair will allow an individual 2 minutes to address the commission. A spokesperson recognized as representing a group in attendance may be allowed up to 5 minutes. This policy applies to all public hearings. And we will turn the time over to the staff.
Okay, so this is for a 7-lot subdivision. It's just off of 6600 West, in the south part of town, if you can see on the vicinity map. These 7 lots The base density for this zone is 1.8 units per acre, which means they would get automatically be eligible for 7.9 units per acre. And with bonus density, because they're in the 8.25 zone, they would likely be able to get up to 8 or 9 based on system improvements and road dedication or road improvements, things that they're providing. So anyway, they're asking for 7. So this is a pretty simple subdivision. You can see on the preliminary plat, they have the large lot on the south that is being maintained. That's because there's a current residence on it and they plan to maintain residency there. But the rest of the lots are being split up. There's a large slope issue to the east, on the eastern border or boundary of this subdivision, however. And for that reason, engineering had to work quite a bit with the applicant to find suitable drainage solutions for stormwater management. And also, there is another half-acre lot. I think it's lot 3, if I'm not mistaken. It's really tiny now, but I think, so they maintain a couple half-acre lots in this subdivision too, which is something that just in general the city likes to see when we can in areas like this in the 8.25 zone. Anyway, those are the basics. I'll let the applicant talk about any specifics for his plan.
Thank you, Craig. If the applicant's here, do you mind coming up, and if there's any more you'd like to share?
Sorry, I'm a little hard of hearing. Dan Briggs, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. We have been working on this for about a year, and we have gone right through everything the planning department has asked us to do. And I thought perhaps, I sit on the Planning Commission in Washington County, so I had hoped that maybe you had been given a map overlay and a little bit more information on this subdivision. But we feel, and I think planning feels, that it fits quite well in with the neighborhood. Our density is where it needs to be, and we would like to control the rest of, a large part of the rest of the development, because as was stated, Terry and her husband Bo Bland live on the large lot to the south, so they're very concerned that they have a nice neighborhood on this piece of what was initially intended to be pasture below them be finished off. So I think we worked with an engineering firm that I believe is very familiar with how things are done in the city, Northern Engineering, and they seem to feel real confident this will fit in and work very well. So our neighborhood meeting went excellently. I didn't have anybody that was at all resistant to our intentions to do what we plan to do, and I'm here to answer any questions if anybody has them.
Are there any questions at this time for the applicant, or we can ask questions maybe after the public hearing?
Yeah, wait.
Okay. Thank you so much. You can sit for now. There may be questions after the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Can I offer one thing real quick?
Sure, Craig.
I forgot to mention, I apologize for that. There was a comment during the neighborhood meeting. There was somebody who was wondering whether they could do CC&Rs. And this goes to a little bit of what Mr. Briggs was saying. They wanted to control the development. There's also, the person at the meeting wanted them to do CC&Rs much like the Valley View subdivision. So we did a little check on that just to see what the CC&Rs of the Valley View subdivision were. Their CC&Rs were done in 2007 when Herriman didn't have any single-family design criteria. Hence, there was more of a need for CC&Rs back then. We also didn't have landscaping requirements at the time. Today, we have pretty robust landscaping requirements. And probably the biggest point is that the city cannot and does not enforce CC&Rs. HOAs have to be formed and they have to monitor, or neighbors have to monitor on each other. But if we leave it to our current design standards, and this is a quick comparison, the basics here, you don't have to read, you're certainly welcome to read every single word, but I realize that this was put together after the packet was sent out. We control everything from home size through our own ordinance, through landscaping, through the two-car garage, from the length of the driveway, from the roof pitch, things that the Valley View CCNRs did do because our ordinance didn't at the time. Now we control it through our own ordinance, and we can enforce it through our own ordinance. We could not enforce it if we have them do CCNRs. So that's just a point I wanted to make because it was a concern that was presented during the neighborhood meeting.
Okay. And at least looking at it just briefly, it looks like the only two that really aren't listed are the last two for Valley View. All RVs shall be stored behind the front of the garage and behind the fence, no parking of any and all vehicles on the main street. It looks like everything else is the standard for the cities a little higher.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And also, we do have parking enforcement available to us for RV and how they're parked. They're supposed to be parked on the sides of homes. They're supposed to be parked in the back. Now, enforcement's an issue because we don't have enough manpower to always do that. And then also the no parking of any kind for all vehicles or for any vehicles on the main street. We couldn't enforce that today via CCNRs or through our ordinance because people
Correct.
can park on the street.
Public street.
Yep.
So. All right, thank you, Craig. At this time, we will open the public hearing, so if there's anyone here that would like to say anything, just come up to the podium and state your name, and then you'll be given 2 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Randall Isham. I live on 14431 South, 6600 West, which is directly east of the proposed subdivision. I don't have anything against the proposed subdivision. I think Terry and Bo have the right to go ahead and put a subdivision in. I just had a few questions I would like answered that I see on the engineering review and the staff recommendations to have clarified. The first question is on the lane going back and forth. And I'm not sure who's going to be answering the questions.
Right now, we'll just listen to your statements, and as we talk, hopefully we'll be able to answer them.
On that lane, well, it says it needs to be fully constructed with curb and gutter on the north, curb gutter sidewalk on the south. Is that going to be excavated down, or is that going to be level grade on that particular part of the road? Maybe I should just ask the questions and then let you go back on that.
This isn't really a
'Cause I only
question and
have 2
answer
minutes.
session. This is you bringing up concerns you.
This will be
Okay.
your comments, and then we'll talk as a group afterwards.
Sounds like fun.
Thank you.
Okay, so who would like to answer that one?
No, right now,
Oh,
yeah, you
Okay.
just add your comments, and then we'll be able to
Okay,
talk
next-
after the public hearing.
next question on the staff recommendation, it said there's going to be a 6-foot precast wall along 6600 West. And that's on the staff recommendation. On the April 8th engineering review, it indicated that there should be a precast wall there, plus a 5-foot sidewalk, plus a 5-foot landscaping, plus curb and gutter. Is that going in, or is just the wall going in? That's next question. That was my question. Next question, where's the sanitary sewer coming from? We were on septic tank, and I'd always like to know if it's coming close enough for me sometime in the future to hook up or not. And which was one of my questions. One of the questions on the community outreach back on September 5th was you addressed the CCNRs that you're not going to impose that, and I was very concerned about that, whether that was going to be imposed or not. Currently, we're at agricultural A.25 is our zoning right now, and the question is that zoning going to be maintained? Are we going to maintain it? Am I going to be able to also be able to have animals at my property? Right across the road on 6600 West, directly east of it, I have a 1/4 acre corral. Am I going to be able to still have horses there? And that's just one of my questions I have on that. And lastly, on the engineering review, there was a question, where is the storm drain? Where's the storm water going? And I also have a question, where is it going and how's it going to be corralled?
Thank you so much for your
Thank you.
comments. At this time, seeing no one else for public comments, we will close the public hearing and then turn to the Planning Commission for comments.
So I have several. Normally, when we see a subdivision map, plat, we see a lot, for the preliminary, we see a lot of grading, we see a lot of where the existing structure is. It's brought a lot of questions from me that I think needs to be addressed before I can make any motion other than continue. For me, I don't see where the current house is. I don't see, I understand that we want to fence a precast wall along 6600 West, and I totally agree, but we're going to be basically putting a wall in front. I want to understand what that means to Lot 7. I also would like to understand as well, I had the questions on where the sewer was coming from, and I believe we need to make sure that it is actually buildable before we do anything on the amount of lots we can or cannot support. So it needs to show the steep slope, like was brought up. All of that is a requirement per our ordinance for us before we can even make a motion. So I don't see that we have any of that information right now to do anything other than say, it's a good idea, but we'll have to see.
Thank you, Adam. Any other comments on the Planning Commission?
I had a question on what Lot 8, it said it would be maintained by Herriman City. What will it be, just a green open space, or?
That's the area for their storm drain.
Okay, thank you.
It would be landscaped and.
Commissioner Jacobson, I'm just wondering, would you be interested in hearing kind of a report or an overview from our city engineer on the civil engineering plans?
I'm okay hearing that, but that typically that's what we require, and that's why I'm surprised we don't have it.
Visual.
I mean, for years we've had, it's required, you see some slope and some analysis, so we can actually kind of get a feel for what the land is other than just a napkin sketch of the exact details of the plat.
Okay.
And so I was
And I apologize, I don't know what we've always have included in past packets. It sounds like maybe it was just an oversight.
No, you're absolutely right. We were rushed and we don't have a great excuse. This is something that I think we actually do even have the information, but it wasn't in the packet and it's not on the planning.
That's what I'm hearing
So,
from
yeah.
Josh, is that we do have it.
I have the full plan set on my computer right now.
So did they do a 30% analysis then?
They're well beyond that.
So it's too steep?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I thought you were asking.
My question is lot 4 and 5 buildable? Did they do a buildable analysis? Because you say in your guys' staff report that it's unclear on the current setbacks and slopes, particularly lot 4 and 5, and usually that has impacted in hillside development what the buildable lot would actually do, and that's what I'm asking.
I think with a little bit of grading, it's no problem. It's just a bit early to drop it down.
So you're comfortable with them filling it in? I guess just for me, I just don't have enough to know what is really going on for me to be comfortable with it.
The only buildable question I have is on the width of the lot itself.
There's no frontage.
House in there.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Grading, I see no problems with it.
Okay.
And there's setback requirements that you've obviously stipulated in here as well, in the recommendation. I mean, that's part of the, yeah.
So my question is Bryn brought up, demonstrate that each of the lot is buildable with the current setbacks and slope, particularly lot 4 and 5. Do you feel they've addressed that? But normally, and that's, I guess, some of this is normally we'll also see where the setback lines will be and things like that, and I don't see that, and maybe you guys have it and I just don't see it.
I don't know that they've particularly provided that in this case. We don't always show, because we oftentimes ask them to not show setbacks on their preliminary plans, especially on preliminary plats. You're right, there are times when building envelopes are shown, but we don't have them in this case to show that they can build. You're exactly right.
Whatever the terminology is, our ordinance requires certain things
Yeah.
that we look at, and I don't see those for us to make that decision right now.
No, they're not here, you're right. No argument. I don't know that we have, I don't think we have anything that shows building footprints or building setbacks on the plans showing that it's buildable, you're right.
But that is a part of the staff recommendation, item 6. I mean,
That's right, too.
Granted, I mean, it's up to them to make sure that they meet those requirements.
So that, I guess, what is the fence line, what is the plan, what is staff requiring along lot 7 for the precast wall?
It would be a reduced height wall along their frontage. Foot wall.
So which way does the front of their house?
So they front 6,600.
They do, yeah. So it'd be 6 foot along the backyards of lot 4, lot 5, and lot 6, and then 3 foot along the frontage of lot 7.
So the reason why I'm concerned with where the house actually sits is, as many of you know, I have a concern that in the future, lot 7 will be requested to be subdivided in the future. And I would just like to make sure, if that is the case, we need to make sure that it, A, can be, or B, understand what we're really limiting to this subdivision. So that's why I kind of wanted to see where is the house in the dead center, or what it kind of looks like.
Approximately dead center, slightly to the south towards the rear.
Okay.
So the question being is, do they come back in and try and make it 3 lots, and now they've got 10 there instead of 7,
Correct.
when they're only allowed to have 8?
Correct.
We could make that a condition upon approval, correct? Or not, that lot 7 will not be,
Well, yeah, you can tie it to the density. You can tie this approval to the density that's allowed, and then that means going forward in the future. You can also put a zoning condition, or I guess you can't put a zoning condition. That was stupid, sorry. But,
that's why you're leaving.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can tie it the number of lots, so at least you have, if nothing else, the rationale for why.
Right.
Okay. And then,
Just to the zoning?
correct. There are some options there. And then just, so the 6-foot precast wall only goes along 4, 5, 6, then drops to 3 feet. There will still be a requirement for the sidewalk, park strip, street light, everything in front of it along 6,600 regardless.
Just the driveway that you're avoiding the precast wall, obviously, or is there a buffer, or?
Okay. Okay. And then just for education purposes, zoning will stay what it is for neighboring, grandfathered in. You'll still have the rights that you have at this time. That won't change. And so
Lot
that's,
7, right? Lot
that's
7.
according to how the city does it. If you're grandfathered in with certain rights, that's where you stay unless things are changed in different ways. So,
And the
but at
zone
this
hasn't-
point, that's how it
The
would
zone
be.
hasn't changed, right? So
Yeah.
that's still
Yeah,
agricultural.
no, none of the zones have changed within this area.
And then also on Temecula Lane, I think that was another question. It sounded like, and I want a clarification myself, but on both sides of that street, they are required to put in the curb gutter sidewalk, not just the frontage. Is that right? The way I was reading that?
It would be, it's curb to curb on Temecula Lane.
Okay.
And then on the south side of the road, so along their frontage, it's all the rest of the improvements,
Okay.
sidewalk,
Sidewalk.
Okay.
landscaping, street lighting and all that. And then the same thing over on 6600 West. They're not putting in sidewalk on the side that's
Right.
not their frontage.
So it's just their frontage. They're putting all those improvements in. So I want to clarify that.
And then obviously everything in the circle.
Right.
There were a couple other questions I can answer too. The sewer is going to the west on Temecula, so to answer your question, it's running into Temecula Lane and out. And then the storm drain is going that way as well.
So we've got trench drain.
They're putting in inlets where the new
6,600 will have curb cut on the subdivision.
That's correct.
All right.
Moving the road over, the asphalt over.
And maybe we can take this outside after or during to answer more additional questions, just so we can move the meeting along. And so at this time, I look at it, there's probably, if the planning commission feels comfortable with making a motion, they definitely can. If they feel like they need to continue it, I'll turn to you guys to make that motion as well.
I still think we need to continue it, but that's me. I don't want to.
We do have, if you're interested, and only if you are, we have an electronic plan set that contains everything that is available. It's actually on my monitor right now. You would be able to see it on your monitors right
That's
now.
sufficient, that's fine.
If
Go ahead.
that's what you
Turn it
want to
on,
do.
please.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that something, can we show that on here? Yeah.
The one on the left. There we go.
Okay. I don't know everything by order, but let's see. So here's the,
Just keep going, we're good.
yeah.
All right.
Okay, so there, for example, that looks like it's showing both building envelopes and PUEs.
And it also shows the.
And it
existing-
shows the orientation of-
existing.
And that's, I mean, I guess that's, I can see why Brendan's question was, is building 5 is a very interesting.
Yeah, they'll have to somehow come over in order, I would think, in order to successfully
Can you
build.
kind of scroll down to the scale bar so I can kind of see about how
Sure.
big that is? Okay, you can go back up now. So I actually think it's a huge concern that 5 won't be buildable. Because if you scroll down the scale there,
Yep.
that is a very small lot. And if you look at the way that the building envelope is situated and oriented, 4 will be challenging, 5 will be near impossible, even to get a garage in that right part of the knuckle part of the cul-de-sac.
I guess unless they brought the garage, the driveway sideways.
But what I'm saying is if they're required to meet our minimum of 2,400 square foot home, and that small of buildable lot, I think it may be,
What is the size of the lot on 5?
but see,
It's
it's
third
but it's
acre.
big.
Third acre.
But it's big. I'm not saying it's not a big enough lot. I'm saying with how much that bulb pushes in, I think it will be challenging to fit a home in. If you just, like I said, if you just look at that scale of the, and it's hard because I don't have actually something to.
And then it's 68, is that 68 feet? Is that what that says?
But if you scroll
On the
down
far
back
side?
to the buildable lot,
That is what that says.
but what I'm saying, scroll down, back down. They can only build in this smaller box on number 5.
That's right.
The house can't go outside of that. And that's what my
That's right.
concern is if, Craig, if you could move your mouse to the top line, right?
Oh.
The buildable line right there.
Yep, right here.
Down to the bulb part. That is fairly small if you really look at how, I mean, that's like maximum 30 feet. And that's just me eyeballing it.
So you're suggesting that, and Bren was raising this issue up, right? Demonstrate that it's buildable.
That's my whole point
So
with
we'd
this
just like to
is-
see a concept plan that works.
Especially since staff brought it up, I do think we need to ensure that 5 really is buildable with our, since we're not gonna do CCNRs, and we're gonna have a 2,400 square foot requirement and certain things, I think 5 may be difficult to build on. Because the bulb is pushed to, is very close to 66 instead of being centered, which causes it to take all of the brunt of the buildable lot. That's a concern of mine. That's why I was asking these questions about this.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Other than that, I think you addressed all my questions by letting me see this. And then my other question, I guess, would be, what are we going to do with the drainage coming across the current home that will be, I mean, I don't see that it's being captured. Obviously, it's going to the ravine that's going through 4 and 5.
There's no drainage coming through there anymore. It was old drainage easement.
So is your plan to capture it and take their current lot drainage? I mean, they still have drainage going on lot 7. It's funneling into lot 4 right now. There's no drainage that either takes you between 4 and 3 or takes you towards 66.
I can see your point there.
Because that's so drastic of a drainage.
Yeah.
Landscaped area there and stuff.
Yeah, I'm just saying that is substantial enough that, because it's almost 2 acres, and if they sell off lot 7 after they decide to sell this home to somebody that really wants to turn it into a pasture, which they totally can do right there, it could be a lot of water running into lot 4. That's what I was concerned with.
Kind of.
So my biggest issue is lot 5, but I would like to know what's going on with the drainage. Because we're just basically damming it off, and I think it will go in the basement of lot 4.
So really determining if Lot 5 is buildable
Yep.
based on the city standards, and then Lot 7 on where the water is going to be stored and where it's contained.
And then showing the fence, actually where the fence will be.
Yes.
Those are my 3 big things that I think we're missing. The other 2 I actually could have put in the motion to move forward, but I don't think 5, I have enough information for 5, especially with the city planning staff suggesting it was a concern already.
I think it's a valid point. All right.
So with that, I'd like to make a motion, unless anybody else has any other comments.
Adam?
I move to continue item 2.1 without date for the applicant to address the buildable area on Lot 5, show the fencing locations along 6600 West, and then develop the plan to mitigate the drainage swell.
Motion by Adam,
I'll second that.
second by Brody, and we'll call for a vote on this, starting with Lauren,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Brody,
Yes.
Adam,
Yes.
Andrea,
Yes.
and Jackson.
Yes.
All right. Now we'll move on to item 2.2, and that item has actually been withdrawn by the applicant. So we will proceed on to 2.3, which is a request for a conditional use approval to construct a 5-tenant retail commercial building, including building elevations and site plan for Lot 7 of Herriman Corner, and we'll turn to city staff.
Okay, this is for a 5-unit retail building, as you just said. It's in Herriman Corner, which is on 134th South and 5600 West, also known as Rosecrest Road. And so it's just like the buildings, more or less, to the north and south of it. That's where, for example, the State Farm, the physical therapy, there's a number of different things that are located down there. So this gives you just some idea of how it lays out with the adjacent lots that are already populated. This shows a view with Ace Hardware to the west, the retail building to the north, and the one to the south as well. So with this, we can get a little closer. We can see the exact parking lot plan. We can see their landscape plan, what they're looking to do. And of course, for these, they of course have to meet our landscape requirements, as they also have to meet our parking requirements, as was mentioned in our staff report. So with the 5 units and in the building and our staff report reporting on what is I won't say likely, but very possible to go there. We have spec'd out kind of what the parking looks like. If they ended up getting more parking intensive uses, then that will in maybe 2 or 3 of the suites, that will actually limit them from certain types of uses in the 4th or 5th unit. And then here we show the perspective elevations. The darker parts of the elevations are labeled as the stone or brick veneer, so they easily meet the 60% in this case. You see the Subway logo on the one side. That's because Subway is looking to move from their current location to this location, because here they can own the building and they would be the ones that are subletting it out. So they would be in control of the building from that point, from the point of sale forward. Anyway, those are kind of the basics. I will go ahead and let you and the applicant discuss.
If the applicant's here this time, if you want to just state your name and then any additional details.
My name's Brad Lassiter. I'm an agent with NAI Premier. I reside in North Ogden. The applicant, Stephen Maycock, is here. And I met with Dave Murdoch, who most of you probably know, that built the ACE building, that he gave me the staff review, and there's nothing we object to in the staff review or the comments.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant from Planning Commission?
I just can't remember, but is the precast wall, you have a very small portion of it, but is it built along the detention pond?
I'm not sure what your question is. I'm sorry.
It's in,
So if you look at the current map, there is a property line that you butt up against a detention pond in a residential area. We have a requirement to put in a precast wall along all commercial.
it looks like it's a very small corner on the top left of your property.
One of our mistakes, and I'll be straightforward with you, is with the subdivision application, we did not require that. We waited until you all
Tenants
came in,
came
the
in.
tenants came in. And so you have a very, very small portion of it, but it is still a requirement for against adjoining uses.
Okay, and Dave's not here because I don't know if you know this or not, his wife fell and she's in surgery as we speak.
that's too bad.
She got hurt really, really bad, so that's why Dave's not here. I do remember, I helped him do the building where the American Burger is, and so I kind of remember that little piece there. So you're saying we're responsible for a small portion of that?
Yeah. Correct.
Just the blue corner on the top left with the little L shape
The
right
hope was that it would eventually become all one big giant precast wall, but that segment, since it is technically your lot, needs to be addressed.
Does that make sense, Steve? Yeah, sure. No objection to that.
there. All right, thank you. If there's no other questions for the
I have a quick
applicant, okay, Jackson?
It says 60% stone or brick. It looks like it was drawn as CMU, just graphically. Is it stone or is it brick or what material?
Stone or brick? I think it's stone, isn't it? The 60%?
I can't hear what you said.
Do you mind coming up to the podium? We're having trouble hearing and.
I'm Stephen Maycock, I'm the applicant. As far as I'm aware, are you referring to block as brick?
The darker area where it says stone or brick veneer,
Right, that's brick.
that is, that'll be brick?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions while they're up here? Nope. Thank you so much. You can have a seat. I'll turn to the Planning Commission for additional comments.
I had a question for staff. So on the potential tenant for a dry cleaner, in the past, they were like really they contaminated the soil and things like that. What do we do now to make sure that doesn't happen?
What do we make sure the dry cleaner does?
Right, yeah.
They have to meet, Adam would know this better than me, I think it's sewer district, and there's health department
So there's
requirements. Yeah,
probably
it's
newer
very
standards
regulated.
now that
Yeah.
make sure that doesn't happen.
It's very regulated.
Okay,
Can I
thank you.
speak to that?
Yeah.
It's a drop-off and pickup store only. There's no equipment
that's
inside the building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I apologize, I didn't tell you that, but it's just a drop-off and pickup.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll turn to the Planning Commission for a motion.
I will just point out, and I apologize if you talked about this. I wasn't here, so I want to make my comment. Sorry, Lauren. Man. This landscaping plan does not meet our landscaping ordinance, so they will have a few changes to make still. I think the requirement says that. Like, they don't have trees in the park strip along the road. Those will have to be added. But there's a requirement in there that says you have to meet all the requirements of the landscape chapter, so I'm,
Yeah, that's item 8.
And Bryn, maybe you can address that corner that, for the precast wall between the residential. Do you have an idea of what is happening with that? Is the itty bitty corner on the top left?
Along the detention pond.
they were not required to do precast
Well, that's that separates the residential and the commercial.
Yeah, but they were required, give me that, no, sorry. Wow, they were required to do it. Here was my memory, but not adjacent to the detention pond.
I thought we did, back when this was a hospital area.
I will double check.
My memory was, again, my memory was that we required it all along here and up here too.
I believe we just didn't require them to go to this current subway lot and
Right.
fix that, which
That's right.
eventually, hopefully, will be a new conditional use and we can require that. Because it is an issue.
It currently is an issue. Okay.
And it's a very small piece of this property, but if you remember, that was where we didn't require it to the subdivision. We required it, we pushed it down the road. And that's why we're having this problem now.
And it does look like item 8, we'll have them bring it back so they meet Herriman's city codes for landscaping.
Do you know, is there just two, like, materials on the front of the building is what it looks like? Across the whole,
It's
guess
item
facade.
9 as well. There's a requirement for the, if you look at item 9, right, it has requirements for the landscaping. Is that what you're?
I'm just saying the building materials, if there's like
Oh.
a variation between each building, like each company, or not company, but business. I don't know, we've had a, like, material board brought in before, which is nice to see.
Yeah, we didn't receive a material board for this one, did we? As it looks like it is brick, I think is what they defined it for the darker material, but
I can tell you that it was originally meant to be CMU. They meant for it to be CMU. Dave Murdoch, we informed him that CMU did not count as brick or stone and did not count towards the elevations requirement that was required for 60% on all 4 sides of the building. So he went back, took the elevations. He provided us with this back where he didn't change the texture of the drawings or of the renderings, but he did change the verbiage of the renderings to reflect it as stone or brick. And then Dave was supposed to be here tonight, so he could have answered that question. It wasn't anticipated he wasn't going to be here. So I don't think they were probably aware of the change. It was fairly recent.
okay. And item 4 does state that elevation must have 60% stone or brick, so it is in the requirements.
Which is why we specifically said CMU does not count.
Do we want to make to specify whether or not that's whole brick? I've seen a number of projects in town where they seem to be doing like these it's almost like a brick panel. It's like a faux brick.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that really is the intent of our ordinances. I think we are getting some projects that do whole brick, or the stone, but
I would say a
you're
face
an
brick.
architect, Jackson, you know
You could
that.
say like a face brick?
Yeah, or it's even kind of like a preformed little panel that you glue on.
Well, and with this one,
That's what the KFC did.
I just wanted to make sure that if you're expecting whole brick or real brick,
you could even get you can even brick that's the size of a CMU. It might be half as tall, but then it has the depth of
Yeah.
a CMU.
like I noticed
I
on
don't
the
know,
Ace
but I don't know what
Hardware, they just kind of like applied it. They just kind of glued it onto the CMU fascia.
The way they say
I'm
it
not sure we
never
really
costs.
got an actual,
That was the same what happened to KFC. Is
Yeah.
They glued on and then they painted over the top of it.
Anyway, I'm just kind of raising,
Yeah.
if that's consistent with what we're trying to achieve, or if we really want.
So I always like color boards personally, so we know exactly what we're getting. Then interpreting a note that's been changed from a note, but that's me. So
I would agree there.
It would be good to see the brick.
And then speaking on colored brick, that green subway wall, is that,
what's that made out of?
yeah, what is that?
Is it paint?
Painted brick, or do you know?
This finished accent wall. Does that meet, I mean, we've never done anything like that. Does that meet?
Is that
Is
considered
that
like a
considered a
sign?
sign?
Yeah. That's what I was gonna
Because
say.
it does kind of feel like a big sign.
So you're raising some good questions. That's your job. Good. Thank you.
We changed the ordinance, if you remember, after KFC, to say that they couldn't.
I remember that.
So I would agree, if that whole thing is painted like that, then the whole thing would probably be considered a sign.
Correct.
Yes.
So I think we need to address that before we maybe have the architect kind of explaining what their vision is, might
And a
be
materials
sufficient
board.
in the future, and the materials board.
You could also, if you want to, just approve the site plan and have the elevations come back.
With the landscaping?
Whatever you guys want to do.
We'll turn to the planning commission for potential motion, if we're ready.
You ready now?
Not now. I lost my momentum.
I just think, I feel like there's too many.
Yeah, and it is true, there are a lot of questions of the material, the overall landscaping, the corner between the residential, of exactly what that will be. So there are definitely some questions with this. We always can have them bring back some of them and just approve the site plan, or we can proceed forward with continuing. So that's some of the potential things we can do.
My recommendation at this point now would be just to continue the whole thing
Okay.
and bring back a bunch of pieces separately. It'd be cleaner just to continue it.
I'll make a motion, then we continue item, what is this, 2.3?
2.3.
I'll second it.
Sorry, Jackson. A motion by
Without
Andy.
date, by the way. Without
Second by Adam, and we'll call for a vote. Jackson?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Lauren?
Yes.
At this time, we'll move on to the legislative items, which we do have three, it appears. The first one being a request for text change to the Land Development Code, adding animal shelters as a conditional use in the C2 and A1 zones. There was a public hearing held on September 5th, and we'll turn to the city staff.
Okay, so this has been before you previously. This, when we talked about it, it didn't appear that anybody on the planning commission had any real issues with the idea of allowing animal shelters in town. What I received guidance on was to come back with city recommendations as to what type of distance restrictions there be implemented with it. So what I did is I went through our ordinance, all of it. I went through how we treat different structures and animal restrictions in agricultural zones and against residential even. And from that, you can see item number 2. So superscript item number 2. Which is listed at the bottom, no animals kept or maintained closer than 40 feet from any dwelling on adjacent parcels, and no barns, stables, coops, pens, corrals to be closer than 40 feet to any street. So those are the recommendations from the city that we've got. Otherwise, everything else remains, oh, no, there was one other change. I forgot. There was discussion before, it was allowed only in the A1 zone as a conditional use. Now it's allowed, or proposed to be allowed, in the 3 agricultural zones as a conditional use on the condition that the parcel be 1 acre in size or larger. So those are the 2 changes.
Thank you, Greg. And since the applicant is Herriman City, obviously the city staff has nothing else. We'll move on to the planning commission for comment or questions.
I think you captured it all, except for I don't think it should be an 8.25, because I think Old Herriman is 8.25, and you have a lot of 1 acre lot sizes. And there are several areas that I know of that you could do this, and it would change the entire feel of the Old Herriman area.
Okay.
So that's my only recommendation. I don't see an issue with 8.5 or A1.
Okay.
But in that zone, I think it does lend us to have a little bit more. That's my only issue.
Great.
Yeah, I'm okay with that as well. I also think the 40 feet will help out a lot with limiting the ability for some of these lots to do it.
Yeah, That's why I like the 40 feet, but I think an 8.2 in the old Herriman is where shouldn't be in that zone.
Sounds like a condition of your motion.
Okay.
Is there any, well, is there any limit of animals? I don't think we addressed that at all. Like the amount of animals. that
Is
can
there a
be in
limit
shelter.
according to,
Is there a limit to, no, there isn't. The limit is imposed by Herriman's own animal services.
Yeah, it's our own animal shelter. These are public animal shelters. Right?
These are, but they still have to be inspected and permitted.
Does it allow for
by-
private?
They're not just public animal shelters.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So this could be a
Oh,
private.
no, it's private. It's literally any third party other than Herriman
So-
that
so
really
is
we're
there-
talking about. Yeah, it can be Herriman, but
is there a
it's-
federal or state standard to how many animals that?
No.
So
It's
there's
only
no-
based
there's no
on.
standard at this point.
It's based on the ability of the facility to adequately treat the animals.
Which is
Okay.
monitored by who?
Harriman Animal Services.
Okay, yeah, I don't have concerns there, but.
The
if you
county
guys do-
was doing this before, and now it's just recently changed to Harriman City in our own animal services
I mean,
department.
how is it enforced, like, by law enforcement, or like, if there's a problem?
Oh, it's enforced based on complaint. It's also enforced based on application to the city for an animal, and obviously complaints for if they're already running. But in order to get, to become an animal shelter within the city, it's a conditional use. They apply through us, they'll come to you, and they will not be able to operate until they successfully get permitted by Harriman's Animal Services Department.
Right now, there is no use like this in Herriman. That's
There is
why we
not,
put this.
at all.
And there's just general, like, square footage per animal that they go by?
I think they probably do have a rule of thumb, but they don't have a particularly, I don't think they have a strict one. I'll admit, I'm not as familiar with Herriman because our Animal
Brand new,
Services
yeah.
Department just started. The county didn't have a specific square footage. They would just come in and based on visual inspection and visual condition of the animals, that's how they would make the determination.
I don't know, for me, I'd like to have animal services come in and talk to us about it.
Well, I mean, this is recommendation
See
one.
Mike going like this.
But
so-
I at least look at it from the perspective of if animal services is making sure they maintain a certain quality, the quality is going to go downhill if they have too many animals. And at that point, they'll be shut down or whatever happens. And so I'm not as concerned with that if they are monitoring it on a regular basis. Because, I mean,
But we don't know what that basis is right now. Right?
yeah.
That's my problem. is-
Okay.
I actually don't have an issue with it. I kind of want to hear what they say, but I can understand that they're still going to be conditional use. So say this is an animal shelter for cats, they're going to have to come in and tell us all of that for that conditional use to even get to do a shelter.
And we can recommend to the city council that they do have the animal services come in to recommend the amount of animals or anything like that.
Because that's a different, I mean, to me, then we're starting to get into, you know, all kinds of different animals where,
Right.
who knows what,
Yeah.
that, somebody might just want to do a horse animal shelter and somebody might want to do a bunch of different animals and that, I don't think we can control that until that conditional use. I do think we have planning staff bring in animal control, like they've done code enforcement for just general awareness. But I don't think we can tie it to this. I think we need to have this zone somewhere, because right now we don't have the ability anywhere.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think stopping it right now is going to stop that discussion, because it's not permitted. That's one stop. So they're gonna have to present all of those facts to us before we can say, yes, proceed.
I agree, because of the condition. So I-
Because it is
yeah.
conditional. If it was permitted, I would be agreeing with you 100%, but it's conditional. And that's all we're permitting, is that it's now conditional to put it in those 3 zones.
Yeah.
Well, 4, then you're going to get rid of 1.
Recommending
Agreed.
3 out of 4.
Yeah, recommend 3 out of 4.
Okay.
All right, Adam,
I would like to recommend approval of item 3.1, a text change to the Land Development Code, adding animal shelters as a conditional use in the C2, A1, and A.5. I do not feel it should be, and I want this to be told to the council, I do not feel it should be an 8.25 because of Old Herriman and the proximity to several other areas that would change the character of the community.
All right, thank you, Adam.
I'll second.
Second by Lauren. We'll call for a vote. Lauren?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Adam?
Yes.
Andrea?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
All right, that'll go to the city council. Item 3.2, which is a request for update and discussion of an indoor-outdoor recreation center known as Game Point, including site plan and building elevations, and we'll welcome Aaron back in a second, but we'll turn to city staff.
Yeah, really, we can just have Aaron come on up again. This is just an update to kind of keep you in the loop on the different changes that they've been making, so.
All right.
Can't wait.
I'm not sure you have to introduce yourself at this point.
Well, I know we've been back so many times, but we're very grateful for your patience with us as we've gone through some iterations in reaction and response to the changes that you've requested. I'd actually like to invite up Silver Peak Engineering Team and have them walk through the specifics of the changes that we've made and how that meets the requirements, both of the landscaping requirements and site plan and parking components, all of that. I'd like to invite Jared and Kathy up and let them explain some of the changes that we've made.
Thanks. I am Kathy Stevens. I'm with Silver Peak Engineering. So I guess we'll start with the site plan. We have increased the parking a bit. I know there were some concerns about not quite enough parking. So I'm not sure if you guys got a current count on that. We're currently at 259 stalls, I believe, give or take one or two. And so we also have been working with our landscape architect to get some landscape design done for a specific way, well, the entire site, but he's been putting a lot of focus into the golf course area and the patio area for the reception area. And so we've been working very closely with him on that. We've also made some changes to the exterior elevations that have been pretty significant, that we feel like will be a really, really great addition to the community here. Do you want to talk about some of those changes that we made, or?
Which are we?
Elevations, so.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so,
Yeah.
Wow.
okay. Well, I saw some old ones there.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah, I took
I was
all
like,
the
whoa,
Devon
wait.
ones, so.
For comparison,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm Jared Forsyth. I'm the architect of record on this project. So what we did is we really wanted to focus on the two-story space and kind of create, make it kind of almost a gem, so to speak, something that creates a lot of visual interest. So that's the two-story space that's kind of a whitish grayish color kind of there. And what that would be is a kind of a cow wall system, something that's opaque and could be lit up, and literally at nights it would kind of glow in a sense. We lifted it up a little bit on kind of I don't know the exact material yet, but like possibly concrete or something to get it off of the ground to feel like it's kind of hovering a little bit more. And then if you look at the bottom kind of perspective view there, the entry, we've taken that entry wall and gone all the way through the building to kind of create a little bit more interest with the entry and establish it more as an entry. Put a thin kind of narrow canopy on top, so to speak, that makes it not feel too heavy, but something that really kind of sets it apart as an entry. And then the other walls, we can talk about that entry. So this is the entry over by kind of the grill. And that entry, we're trying to kind of mimic a little bit what's going on with the front entry, so that we're really trying to define what the entry is and give it a look and a feel so that both of those are defined. And you can see we've put where it says element 24, we're using those walls as signage as well. And then the other forms are kind of going to be somewhat secondary. We really want the focus to be more on this gem, so to speak, and the entries. So the rest will be more kind of a CMU type of building. You can see it in the rear elevation, the one that's middle to the right. We'll have different colors of CMU, and we've kind of played with the heights of those a little bit to kind of give it a little bit of I don't know the right word there. Give it a little bit more depth and not just have everything the same height. We've also added some green screens there. If you look at the front elevation, kind of the right where the CMU is kind of that grayish color, those would be green screens. I don't know if you're familiar with those or not. But basically it's like a three-dimensional mesh that sits off the wall about like that, and vines and different landscaping features can grow up. So instead of it, so it breaks up that long expanse of CMU with greenery, essentially, is what it does. So, and then we've also got that kind of the social media wall, I guess is what we're calling it. I'm not a social media guy. I don't have the Facebook, so it's yeah. I know it's a huge deal, so it is a big deal. So that's basically where things are going now. We feel that it's come a long way. It's definitely going in the right direction, we feel, but I don't know if there's any questions, but.
The only question I have is, so the element 24, so is that just outdoor seating for the restaurant? Is that what you're thinking?
On the area behind.
The white area?
Yeah. So we've got a patio area that'll be upper and lower.
Up and lower, okay. I guess the only thought or question is, so are you gonna have, I notice with a lot of restaurants that have outdoor seating, they have maybe like a 2 or 3 foot, some sort of fencing to make it to where there's one entry point or exit, and I noticed that not on the bottom. That was the only question I had.
We're going to be incorporating that into the site.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
The key for us on this review was to make sure that all the core issues or requests from the Planning Commission had been addressed at this point. I know that there were some stylistic comments in the last conversation that we had that we have not necessarily addressed. We feel like from a structural perspective, from a general look and feel perspective, from a landscaping and parking perspective, that we've met all of the core requirements from you. But we do want to be prepared for a final approval on the 3rd of October, which is our hope to come back at that time and have that. From your perspectives, my question is there anything that you think we are fundamentally missing or need to address before then?
Just quick one to Bryn.
Go ahead.
Did we have enough stone or brick on the finish to meet our design?
No, they're asking for an exception for the 60% requirement.
In fact, we did submit, I don't know if you have that with you, but we do have a design specifications document.
We did submit that, yes.
And that actually outlines what we are trying to accomplish with this, because it's not really in city ordinance right now for our size of facility. We're making a recommendation on what the property should do.
Okay.
So they're doing a development agreement with the council, and they will approve that exception, and we'll bring those design guidelines to you at the next meeting for your approval too.
Yep.
All right.
So if you're looking for opinion, I think I'm good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Get going.
Fantastic. Let's do it. I can't wait to get, I know. Well, we really appreciate your help along the way as we've iterated through this process. We hope that then on the 3rd we'll come back and there really won't be anything more that we'll provide to you except maybe a few touch-ups for our final approval. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Well, what's the square footage of the other building? I know you don't.
The 10,000 square foot building to the north.
Okay, so it's 10,000?
Yeah, it's 10,000.
That one. I can remember.
That one.
That one. Thank you.
You bet. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you. Continuing that, or is that just like?
Are we looking to continue this?
It's just a discussion, so you don't need to
Okay.
make a motion.
Okay.
You can make a motion.
All right, thank you so much. We will move on to the last item, which is item 3.3, which is a discussion of proposed community development zone. And we'll turn to city staff.
I believe this is our discussion for, okay, so Mike Hathorn is going to give us a presentation. We talked about a PC zone that the county uses and a few other cities have used, and we've been thinking about whether or not we want to add that as a tool in our zoning title. But Mike Hathorn is a consultant that we've been working with from on and off on different projects, and he has developed another tool that he's been sharing with me I believe is better than the PC zone. And so this is going to be just an introduction to this topic. It's kind of to whet your appetite, and then he's going to come back and give a more in-depth conversation or presentation on how this tool works. So you've got a presentation, right, Mike? We're going to walk through. Yeah, so give us,
Board right there on the. Oh, fantastic. That you can just put your.
let's just get this set up here.
Gotta love technology.
Sweet. That was awesome. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you this evening. Strategically, I've put this together knowing that you've already had a very long evening. And this can be, I mean, we're talking about zoning, okay? And not everybody gets as hyped up about zoning as I do, and I can appreciate that. So, like Michael said, I've broken this into two parts. And the first part tonight, I basically want to answer the question of why for you. Because unless you understand why, you really don't need to go any further. And I think we'll all get, hopefully if I do my job right, we will get to the same point of answering the question why, so that when we come back, we can talk about how. Because this is a major issue that municipalities are facing, not just in Herriman, but across the Wasatch Front, throughout the state, throughout the country. So to start this, I kind of want to introduce myself and set a background for how I answered the question why for myself, and then spent 8 years developing a zoning code to help solve problems. My background is in real estate and development, but over the course of the past 25 years, I've kind of been set on this path that I'm going to share with you. I've worked with master plan community developers. I've worked with small developers. I spent almost 10 years working with the LDS Church, with Property Reserve Inc. and Suburban Land Reserve. And my experience across the board has helped me to solve problems as to why things happen the way they do when it comes to development patterns. Very early on in my career, I was working on a project in American Fork. This is the project here. Small project made up primarily of townhomes. There, as you can see, there were some single-family detached homes in this project, which ironically required us to do a PUD because zoning doesn't allow you to mix housing types. It forces you to segregate them. I worked on this project, and to be quite direct, I was somewhat uncomfortable with what the production was. I mean, these are examples, and these are nice looking homes. You've got a single family home on the left, townhomes on the right. They're pretty good. But it was a function of how the pieces were being put together, and I really couldn't put my finger on what was wrong. I just didn't really, I wasn't really jazzed about it. The summer of 1995, I found myself in Gaithersburg, Maryland, visiting my cousin, who lived across the street from the Kentlands. Are you familiar with the Kentlands? Okay, this is part of my planning geek coming out. This is one of my meccas, okay? So I, show up in Gaithersburg. My cousin says, "Hey, let's go across she lived across the street from the Kentlands in an apartment. We walked across the street to, she says, I know you love development. This place is amazing. You're gonna love it. Walked across the street, and my mind was blown. And it forever changed the course of how I looked at my career. Because what I found is a place where the pieces were being put together much differently than what I was experiencing in Utah. And I couldn't understand why. What I found in the Kentlands was a large community made up of multiple neighborhoods where the housing was mixed. Civic buildings were very heavily incorporated into the fabric of the neighborhoods. Highly connected street network running through the neighborhood. Civic space that was not only highly programmed, high quality, but it was embedded in the community in a way that I had never seen before. And then the degree to which they were able to mix uses, where you had non-residential uses that were in a connected relationship with the residential uses. I had never seen this before. And I come back to Utah and I immediately start bugging the developer that I worked with saying, we're doing this wrong. And he's like, hey kid, go do your job. I'm the developer, I know what to do. So, I had this conundrum that I had to deal with for a number of years in terms of the dichotomy that I found between what I was experiencing on the ground as part of development in Utah County and what I experienced at the Kentlands. I then set myself on a quest, and for a time, all I could find were commentaries. These are examples of commentaries that are out there talking about how our system for delivering place is broken. Again, I couldn't explain why, but I understood that the difference between what I experienced in the Kentlands and what I experienced in other neighborhoods, I just needed to figure out what the disconnect was. And finally, I started to understand what the disconnect was. We had, over the course of about 80 years, we had overcommitted the way that we develop to the automobile as opposed to the human being. That was part of it. That was a general principle. And to give you an example of that, this is me laying in the middle of 300 East in Spanish Fork, which is an 82-foot wide asphalt street, 82 feet. You could land a Piper Cub on that thing. So what the crux of this issue is, what I have done in terms of analogizing it is the realization that it's a function of DNA. Our zoning across this country is the equivalent of DNA to us as living creatures. And if we want certain development patterns, the zoning, the DNA of the zoning has to allow for it to occur. If we want something and we're not getting it, it's because the zoning doesn't allow for it. So going back to those photos of the Kentlands, in terms of being able to mix housing, being able to incorporate civic uses, the way that they programmed open space, the way that they allowed for street connectivity throughout the community, the way that they did, all of that is a function of the zoning code allowing for it. That's where our breakdown is. So in kind of a cheeky way, when you think about DNA in nature and as it relates to us as human beings, we have a relationship. We share DNA with everything on this planet. 65% of our DNA matches up with bananas. So 2/3 of us matches up with a banana. I found that interesting. Fruit fly, 70%. A dog, 84%. I thought this next one was interesting because I thought we'd be more like dogs than a field mouse, but we actually share 90% of DNA with mice. And then lastly, our closest relative outside of Homo sapien is the chimpanzee at 99%. Now, the reason that I bring this up is it's the understanding that it's the importance of the genetic sequencing in the delivery of our development pattern. And this is really what we're faced with, what all of you are faced with in terms of the role that you play in this city. There's probably a lot of things that you wish could be done differently, but the bottom line is you don't have the DNA code that will allow you to deliver things differently. That's why there's discussion, for example, about a PC zone, a planned community zone. I have almost 10 years of experience with the planned community zone, and I would tell you wholeheartedly to turn and run because it will not deliver what it is that you are seeking in terms of development patterns. You need something much different than the planned community zone. And if we want to talk detail at some point, I'm happy to do that. But I don't want to put you all to sleep talking zoning code, specifically the planned community zone. What we want to do is we want to be able to deliver a development pattern that is the equivalent of a unicorn. But the interesting fact in that is that while we might want to seek a mythical creature as the delivery of development, if the genetic sequencing isn't correctly, you can get a lot of different horned animals that have similar features to a unicorn but are far from being a unicorn. That's what we're faced with, and hopefully that analogy helps to kind of set the stage for a discussion about how to get what it is that you actually want. So I want to give you a demonstration as it pertains to zoning specifically by showing you a couple of examples. This could be anywhere. This happens to be in Texas, Killeen, Texas. I want you to look at the development pattern. I picked Killeen, Texas and this particular area because I was fascinated with how long the cul-de-sacs were. Their zoning, along with their engineering standards, allows that. That is an allowable condition. When you throw, in fact, maybe some of you have gotten to this point where you can look at it, and this is, I guess, the beauty of Google Earth, is we've become so familiar with looking at aerial photography that I can look at a piece of aerial photography like this and start drawing the lines of where the zoning changes based on what I'm looking at. I would guess that many of you can do the same thing. When you overlay the zoning map, you see a lot of the same. When you get down at street level, this is what the DNA allows in these particular neighborhoods by right. When you look at the buildings, the homes, the housing type, they're all the same. There's not a lot of differentiation there. This is what's allowed by right, and I think a lot of times this is what gets fought over in meetings when projects come forward, because just like what I went through similarly, back in the 90s, not being able to put my finger on what I didn't like and didn't understand, I knew that I would rather not see more of the same. Because again, this could be anywhere. I just happen to be picking on Killing, Texas in this example. You know, more of the same here. So here's another example, completely different DNA. And hopefully you can recognize some of the differences just by looking at the aerial photography there. Their zoning actually looks different too. There's their zoning in terms of the zoning map. When you get on the ground, major difference. What's interesting is to do this. This is a project just outside of Louisville, Kentucky, called Norton Commons. To do what is delivered in Norton Commons, you know, looking at these pictures, a lot of this is illegal under conventional zoning codes. And yet that's more attributable, I think, to where we both want and need things to go. It's an issue of the difference between commodity and community. We've got a system in place in terms of zoning and developers that are married to that zoning that have built a system where they are delivering widgets. They're delivering a commodity rather than delivering community. What we need is the delivery of community, and that requires a certain type of DNA in order to deliver it.
Mike, I'm going to be incredibly rude, and I apologize. I just don't want to make an assumption that some of the things you're showing don't resonate or do resonate with the commission. Would you mind just going back a couple of slides and showing some of those street views? Go back another one. So keep in mind some of the earlier views she was showing from Killing, Texas. Does this resonate with the commission? Do we, I don't want to make an assumption that, see, what Mike and I have been talking about is, do we want to find codes that help to produce places like this, or are we okay with the other images? Because if we're okay with the other images,
you've got it.
Yeah,
It's there.
We're done. We won't keep
the
talking
zoning
about this.
that will emit what you saw in those.
But do
For me, it's
we
just where in the
see
community.
this as something we want to talk about?
I think in certain areas, I think this, and I think in certain areas, I'll be honest, I mean, Killeen, Texas obviously doesn't have as much lush landscape, but more traditional residential is
But shorter blocks, right?
is the issue, right? I mean, I think you're seeing both. Sadly, I'll be honest, in my opinion, sadly, we've been focusing a lot on this type because that's what the density and the master plans have been forcing us to, and the economy and the land value, which is forcing this density. I do think we need to discuss both, to be honest, because I do think you can make even the other one a traditional, more standard, larger lot subdivision.
I just want to make sure that we're not going down a path that isn't resonating this early in the game.
I like where you have the elevation of the brick, and then you have a private, public mix before you hit the house.
And I think one of the big things is the balance of the community, which I think we're lacking.
Correct.
I mean, I don't know if we got the numbers or anything like that about townhomes and smaller density and or higher density, how much of the city that's taken up in the overall units, but it's the balance that we're looking at. When he says, okay, we're looking at, I would define it as mixed use, different options, different higher density with lower density with different options all around and walkability and things like that. We're lacking the lower density within anything like that.
So for example, I'll use myself with what Chris is saying. I would love to live in a place like this. I think it's beautiful, but I could not live in there because I like to do woodworking and I need a bigger garage.
Yeah,
So
and
that's what I'm saying is I
want a third acre. If I could live in
love
this
the
with a
look
third
of this.
acre,
I
I'd
think
be
it's
happy
beautiful.
too.
But I want certain things that, I'll be honest, forces you to have to accept more of the Killeen, Texas concept, potentially. And I think you need to address both.
And we will.
Well, for
We
me,
will.
I think we make houses that look like this but we lack on landscaping. Like, we don't do the brick and the stepping up to the home, which we just sidewalk, grass, house, and we have the houses
Okay.
that look like that. But we lack landscaping and.
Well, and I think we are we have to be realistic, right? We do live in Utah. Our landscaping is not going to be like Maryland. I go
And
there
it
frequently.
shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
We don't have those luxuries that, I mean, they don't have sprinkler systems in their yards. We do have to have those. And we've been told by water-wise conscious. Local scape kind of stuff.
And maybe we can
So-
do patios as separators with large walls.
But I actually think this is beautiful, and I think I could see a couple of my children living in this type of home based off their personality. But I also could see some of my other children not wanting to live in this because
Yeah.
of that type of.
And this proposal will allow for both.
Yeah.
It allows for both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's important to understand that this isn't, and when we get into the details of talking about the delivery, ultimately it is about choice, because you don't want to force one program over another, because there are other things at play, such as the market. And it's not, while part of it is an understanding of how to deal with density and to deal with density in a fashion where you're delivering it appropriately. One thing I think is very apparent. I happen to be working on doing some other project work relative to Senate Bill 34, which I think you're probably all familiar with, and that is the requirement to have an affordable housing plan within your municipality. The ways in which you address affordable housing, oftentimes based on conventional zoning codes, force you to segregate those housing types in a fashion where everybody will be kicking and screaming about the delivery. This is providing an opportunity to deliver affordable housing in a more coherent fashion and having it be a lot more integrated in terms of its delivery, and requiring it to meet the context of community rather than commodity.
So, I mean, you said something, Michael, a little earlier, and affordable housing is a huge controversial, so I won't get into that one. But you said it allows for both. My fear is the concept of allowing for both and the developer driving for one. And so allowing for both or providing for both is a whole different thing. I mean, you can look at a lot of things. When you have diverse from larger lots down to smaller lots to everything else, it provides a different community versus, and so it's really, when I look at it, I mean, there's a lot to think about with this, and obviously he's going to go into a little bit more, but that allowing for both scares me a little bit, because I know very well what's going to happen when we allow it. It doesn't typically provide what's needed. It allows for what the developer wants to push.
So I've seen, not all of this presentation, but I've seen what's coming next, and it's not as...
Better be
It's
exciting.
not as simple as you are thinking.
Better be exciting. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Punchline.
Bring it.
Here, let me get back to where I was
And
here.
you can hit me later for interrupting.
No, not at all. I think because the key tonight is to make sure that we I guess land on the same page in preparation for the deeper dive. Because what I don't want to do is just completely inundate you tonight. What I am going to do is I'm going to, through Michael, I'm going to provide you an educational primer ahead of the next conversation that we have that will help to premise this idea of a community development zone and how that actually works. To the point about providing both and having the developer only deliver one, I will speak to that because that is something that the community development zone actually addresses. In terms of what, using the two examples of Norton Commons and Killing, Texas, you have plenty of Killing, Texas in this valley. You have plenty of it within your city. What you don't have is the alternative. And you don't have the delivery mechanisms for the alternative. And the alternative it's not a density play. Because in order to deliver real, authentic neighborhoods, real and authentic centers, it requires a multitude of housing types. Right now, conventional zoning codes basically deliver us 3. And you talked about 2 of them in the other room before you came in here. Conventional zoning codes deliver you single-family detached on a multitude of lot sizes, but it's still the same product. Townhome, single-family attached product, and then stacked units in either a condo or an apartment form. We have lost so many housing types because they have been made illegal through zoning. There is a broad bandwidth of housing types that, when delivered appropriately, not in concentration, because that's part of the problem, is that conventional zoning forces you to deliver apartments in swaths of 200 to 400 units at a time. And yet there are other ways of addressing rental that don't require you to deliver a concentration of that form. Everything from accessory units to multiplex units to, again, being the planning geek that I am, there will be times I'll just go drive the avenues to look at these just quaint 8 to 12 unit apartment buildings that are on a residential street at a scale at which you can have single family detached homes right next door. Conventional zoning prohibits that. There's a means of being able to deliver things in a way that you're gonna get better results. And that's the basis for the dialogue. I wanted to end with these 2 quotes because I think they speak to the importance of what it is that we're talking about. The top quote basically referencing that the method of delivery should be focused on community and creating authentic places. And then the second one is actually a quote from a developer of a community in South Carolina called Ion. And I've heard him say this a number of times, the idea being, if what you're doing is creating resistance, then it's the wrong system. Because what should be occurring is that the community itself is inviting the extension of development because it's simply adding to the authentic nature of what's ultimately being delivered. Easier said than done. It's not an easy thing to do. So I don't want to oversimplify it. It's hard. Basically the quest that I've been on for the past decade in working on the development of this community development zone can speak to that. It's the genetic sequencing of that code is just, it can be mind-boggling. But the results will exceed what the method of delivery that you might otherwise not have available to you today. So this is not a discussion about replacement. It's a discussion about extension of tools in your toolkit to lead and guide this city.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why we're looking at this is we have been so frustrated with these development agreements. We had an experience earlier tonight where we're trying to weigh, has something been complied with or not, or what level of compliance do we expect as a city? And if we were ever to have another large-scale development, we're looking at, is there another tool that will help us to administrate that type of development that's not a development agreement per se? That's why we started looking at the PC zone, but the PC zone just has a series of negotiation after negotiation after negotiation. It really is difficult to come up with a predictable outcome. You know, Mike uses the words, what's emitted from the code. So when I saw this presentation or this code, which is in use, you've been, what are the, is it Spanish Fork that's adopted this?
American Fork.
American Fork.
So I was hired by American Fork to, in essence, overwrite their TOD code adjacent to the front runner station in American Fork. Their code wasn't working. They understood that it wasn't working, one, because they weren't getting any applications. Secondly, the 2 applications they got, they didn't like what it produced. So they understood the relationship between the code and the development pattern that was being emitted from that code. I completed that code overwrite process back in November, and they have been completely inundated with applications. And, you know, I was telling Michael, I'm now, ironically, I'm now in the business of doing the developers' submittal packages under this code. And I'm getting fantastic results in terms of the delivery to the city. And, you know, I've yet to have a nay vote. Everything's been an up-down vote, because what is being delivered and the way that it's being delivered is solving the problems that they saw relative to what it was that they needed to deliver. Now, the differentiation here is to understand that the code that I've developed, the community development code, is a template code that requires calibration. American Fork had very specific requirements that they needed to put in place in utilizing it as a TOD code. So there was a calibration process to dial it in and provide it I guess you could say the metrics of genetic sequencing that would deliver them what they needed to have that development pattern relate to transit. What Herriman needs it would be completely different. And it would need to be based on what the objectives and goals of the city of Herriman are.
So how do
But
you-
it
how do you
provides a high,
implement it?
sorry, go ahead.
How do you, so we're going through our general plan. How do you, switch zoning types for people? That's always a.
Well, we're not talking about actually switching out zoning that you already have in place, because that's something that landowners actually have by right now.
Yeah.
So there would be, right now, it's the understanding that that part of what you need to look at as an objective is when you have large, because this is, while it can be nuanced to deal with basically block and street level development, it was intended and designed to deal with large, expansive properties. The basis for the foundational basis for the development of this code was to develop something that could help break down thousands of acres. I was working on a project that was 3,000 acres in size, and we had to figure out how to get it from 3,000 acres down to digestible chunks at the level of a lot. So there's a process that needs to be gone through. So in part of the delivery of this, it's understanding that what it is that you want is the delivery of neighborhoods and centers. And that requires a certain acreage. And it's scaled at the level of the pedestrian shed, the level of a human being, so that you're going from center to edge, and when you hit that edge, you then break off and you do another neighborhood. You don't just sprawl into the next area.
So what are your thoughts about like precast walls around commercial? That we do all the time. I mean, I don't like it, but.
Well, that's a completely different environment. You're talking about the reason that you have those precast walls is you are addressing the segregation of one use and the adjacent use.
Right. Yeah.
This is a completely different animal.
Yeah, what this.
You use different barriers then.
What I've been hearing is we have a vision, we have an agreement, and then what gets built doesn't match up very well.
Right.
I think after seeing this code, if we were to ever use it, if we were to ever adopt it, and again, it's for large developments, we would have a vision, and I think that what is emitted by the code would be much closer.
Yes,
That's what I'm seeing in this product.
The vision is extremely critical to this because that is what we are calibrating to. So that there is a marriage between the vision and what gets emitted. There's a disconnect that exists in most zoning today because it doesn't equate that in that fashion.
So maybe just to be clear, what we're looking at is the county and South Jordan and those guys, they have this PC zone that they use. We started looking at it and we brought it to him and we ended up not being overly excited. We have our current zone. We have the ability to do development agreements. And there is going to be, I believe, a time when we're going to need a zone to receive a large annexation into the city. And so what I'm looking at is, do we want to have something ready? What do we want to have that's going to bring that in? And so we're just looking at what's available and just giving some ideas out there of things we may want to consider. If the idea is just go back to the standard development agreement, we have no problem doing that. We can try to bring in a PC zone or look at this. So that's kind of what you're experiencing.
I'm interested to actually see it. I personally think that development agreements on that kind of thing are going to be forced because that'll be part of the negotiation with that landowner. I know that if I own 2,000 acres, I'm not going to be, we'll let the vision, I'm going to tie it up with
I'm getting
some
a
type
development
of development agreement.
There'll certainly
So
be-
what I'm saying is I think this sounds like a good idea. I'd like to see the actual details.
One of the things that really intrigued
You all know
me
me enough to want to see that.
as you walked me through this, and I can't really fully explain it, but you know how we've often said there's a range of density.
Yeah.
You can have the minimum, the maximum, and we want variety.
Choose the
We want
minimum.
various lot sizes. But of course, we always know the developer always goes for the highest density and the smallest lots.
And we have that proof.
And then
We've
we
seen it.
had a developer come to us and say, well, if you want variety, you've got to give me an exception for narrowing up certain lots. And we were saying like, no, that's why we gave you a variety, right? Well, this tool has a variety, and when he explains it to you, you'll see why a developer won't just choose one lot size. Because they will be leaving development potential. I mean, it's pretty exciting when he takes us through the next step, because it actually delivers what we've been asking for.
And I guess I'm sitting here and I'm wondering, because to me, and maybe it's just some of the words that have been used so far tonight, but when you say community development, it's like, so we're looking at the high-density areas and how to fit it in how we want it is what it's sounding. When we throw out affordable housing, everyone says high density.
No.
Because, like he said, we will adjust the metrics for our values, our standards, what we are trying to achieve. So if it's large lots, it can do that. I mean, we'll have to decide what we want it to emit.
So
But-
is it based off percentages?
So is this a form-based code or?
It is a form-based code, yes.
Form-based, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
it'll
but
be
it's
based on our standards.
Yeah, and
It'll be
it's
based on what
it's a
the city
lot it's a lot more extensive because of the process that you have to go through in breaking down large areas of ground. That's part of the issue, and addressing the fact that when you're looking at, in the instance that I worked on, 3,000 acres. Before we developed a system, we struggled. It was, how do you take 3,000 acres and break it down into digestible chunks for the development community? Because I was working for an entity that wasn't a developer. They were a large landowner. And so they were they were basically, we were looking at how do we set the table and do it in a way that we're comfortable in terms of the delivery to the market. So there's the aspect of going through that process and why you're going through that process, and the degree of understanding as to why the developer would commit themselves to that.
Yeah, that's my question. Can you show us that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Because what happens is the developer starts to, and this is what I'm experiencing right now in American Fork, is these developers are trained to deliver widgets. Their widget is either a single-family detached home, a townhome, apartments, not understanding that when you give them a different operating system to work with and what they have available to do by right, because what they are starting to understand is that they are in the market of selling land, not homes. And the way that you sell land is through diversification. If you're only selling, the example that I use is Subway sandwich.
We saw them earlier tonight.
You saw them earlier. What are they in the business of delivering? I would argue that they're not delivering sandwiches. It's about the absorption of bread. But if you walk into Subway and all they're selling is a tuna sandwich, how quickly are they going to absorb? That's why they have, a multitude of different sandwiches, because ultimately the delivery and development is land. And what we need to do relative to our communities is present the developer with the by right abilities to deliver community as opposed to
I think one of the
neighborhoods that
problems,
function
too,
as storage units for human beings.
I think one of the problems that we struggle with too is we kind of have the same design standards for single family versus multifamily, and there's, I don't know, from an appraisal standpoint, there's not, your home is valued a lot higher because you have these really interesting architectural elements to your structure, right? And so that's lost. And so a builder develops as much square footage as they can to make the home appraised for as much as possible.
It's a quantity play.
Oh yeah.
And that's not lost on me. But you have to think, because all of you as leaders in the city of Herriman have a responsibility as it pertains to what gets developed, how it gets developed, and what the contribution of that development is to the city of Herriman in perpetuity. And that's where this becomes a more long-term issue in terms of the ability of development to pay its own way and not be subsidized.
So anyway, we're just going to be looking at ideas to talk about this, because I think the tide's coming sooner than later for us to figure out how we're going to start receiving some large properties. And I just want you to have some thoughts.
I'd be interested in seeing what the meat of something like this is.
So
I mean,
we'll-
right now it's a very 20,000-foot overview.
Yeah,
There's
and-
really no substance we've seen
But
yet.
I want
Yes.
to know why we're doing this. And so-
Yeah, and hopefully I answered why, and now my responsibility for delivery is how.
Yeah.
And so-
And the other part that I'd love to see with something like this is how this affects the neighboring zones around it with infrastructures, with things like that, because a lot of my fear with some of these large developments and what they do is they're really only responsible for their own development in that. So how does it affect the rest of the infrastructure with what we have available?
I can't wait to show you that. Because that's actually something that's accounted for.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, as I said earlier, through Michael, you all will receive an educational primer of this community development code that you can review at your leisure between now and the next time that we get
Is
together.
it like some of our MDAs, the 400 pages and stuff?
There are pictures. I
Oh, that's all that
promise you
matters.
pictures.
I am good. I got this.
I tried to use a lot of pictures to convey information, so.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to coming back and meeting with you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And that was just a discussion, so there's no motion or anything on that one. I will turn to the Planning Commission if there's any additional comments. All right, the future meeting, City Council meeting will be held Wednesday, September 25th, 2019 at 7 p.m. Then we have another Planning Commission meeting Thursday, October 3rd, 2019 at 7 p.m. And then City Council is back in meeting Wednesday, October 9th, 2019 at 7 p.m. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we will see you guys later.